Hey, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. This is Chris Shoemaker, also known as Yehuda Ben Shomer, and welcome to the Weekly Way, your weekly devotional commentary on the Torah, Haftorah, and Brit Hadasha portion. Today, we are in Parashah, or Torah portion number 5, Chaye Sarah, which means the life of Sarah, and it's taken from Genesis chapter 23, verse 1, all the way to chapter 25, verse 17. And I want to focus in and hone in on a very little mentioned, very little known about character in this Torah portion. You've probably read his name 100 times and heard him mentioned, and he's just a background character to help move the story along. But his name is Eliezer, and he was Abraham's right-hand man. He was Abraham's number one, true blue, faithful servant to the end. And why I want to mention him is to bring out the character trait of his humility, his love, and his faithfulness to Abraham and his family. I believe that through the context of the scripture of the life of Abraham and the relationship he had with Eliezer, that Eliezer was more than just a servant. He was more than just a slave or a hired hand or somebody born into his household. Eliezer was not just a friend, but he was probably very much like a son to Abraham. He was his right-hand man. He did everything with Abraham, took care of all of Abraham's business. And so he was probably more like a son than anything else. And if you read the Torah, there comes a point where God promises that Abraham would have offspring. And he says, if I don't have offspring, then Eliezer is going to get everything that I own. He's going to be the one to inherit everything of mine. Though he's not my flesh and blood, though he's a servant, he's going to get it all when I die if I don't have children. So he was more probably like a son to Eliezer than anything else. Now, Eliezer knew this. This was probably no secret to Eliezer. And could you imagine when Ishmael was born? You know, most people in Eliezer's position would be disappointed and a little jealous and a little angry that Abraham actually had children, because he's like, well, there goes my plan for a rich and luxurious lifestyle. You know, Abraham was so rich, he was considered almost like a king almost, because he was rich, and he was so rich that Egypt was jealous of him. He was so rich and he had so much and had a beautiful wife that the Philistines were jealous of him, and he was rivaling with these other Canaanite tribes that were in the area. So Abraham was a very rich and wealthy man. So Eliezer goes, well, you know, there goes my chances of living the rich life and living in a life of luxury. So, you know, he has had a son. So he could have been angry. He could have been bitter. He could have even conspired to kill Ishmael. And then comes Isaac, his second son, the one that the promise was going to go through and that the majority of the inheritance was going to go through. And, you know, maybe he was angry. You know, most people would be angry and jealous of this chosen child, this special child. But Eliezer wasn't like that. You know, he wasn't out for Abraham's riches. He wasn't out to be rich and famous and to be the next leader and the next powerful man in line in Abraham's clan and his household. He loved Abraham probably as a father, and he was just happy to be with him and to be a servant. And he was so humble that he doesn't get angry or mad when Ishmael's born, and there blows his chances of having any inheritance, of any riches. And, you know, in this story, we see that you know, he was probably happy that Abraham had a son, because somebody who doesn't have a son, it usually meant that you were cursed by God. It usually meant that something was wrong and God was preventing you from having children. So when he started having children, Abraham started having children, Eliezer was probably ecstatic and says, hey, my master is blessed. He's always been nice. He's always been rich and wealthy, but now I know he's blessed by God because he has children. He loved Abraham so much that Abraham entrusted him with a task that I wouldn't entrust anybody else with, or anybody with for that matter. And he had the responsibility of being a matchmaker, of going out and finding just the right woman, just the right bride for Isaac. After all, he was the promised one. He was the one, the chosen child that was going to carry on the Abrahamic line, that Messiah was going to come through. And, you know, that was a great responsibility. He could have just went out there and picked any woman, you know, oh, the first one that comes along, or the one that was the most hottest and sexiest and attractive, or the most rich, I'm going to choose that one. I mean, Abraham gave him parameters on who he could choose, but he could have chose anybody. But he believed not only in Abraham, but in a God of Abraham. So he prayed to Abraham's God that God would lead him to the right woman. And as fate would have it, wouldn't you know it, God led him not only to the right woman, but somebody that was related, that was in the same family as Abraham. It was it was Rebecca. So, and it was just the right woman for Isaac. So this was perfect, and God just totally answered this servant Eliezer's prayer. So that's our Torah portion. Let's move on to the Haftorah portion. And I want to focus in on Nathan Hanavi, or Nathan the prophet. And the Haftorah portion is 1 Kings chapter 1, verses 1 through 31. And Nathan, like Eliezer, was a servant to King David. And he was, and David, Nathan was sort of like David's right-hand man. He entrusted Nathan with his most intimate thoughts and secrets and his most intimate plans. Nathan was a prophet, therefore he had a special connection with God, and whatever Nathan said, David trusted that those were the words from God, and he trusted his advice and trusted everything. So despite times when King David refused to heed Nathan's words and pay attention, he paid for that dearly. Nathan never took it personally and said, "See, I told you so." Nor did he wish David's demise as a result of David's disobedience. No, like Eliezer in our Torah portion, he sought divine help and did all that he could to secure the very best future for David, God's chosen kingly line. This coup attempt of David's son Adonijah failed, and Solomon, as a result, with Nathan the prophet's help, Solomon was installed as king and ushered in the golden era of Israel. So just as Eliezer had Abraham's best interests in mind, Nathan had David's best interests in mind. Both of these men knew that they served men of God and that they had a special destiny, and their family line had a special destiny. So let's move on to the Brit Chadasha portion, the portion in the New Covenant Scriptures. And this is Acts chapter 15, verses 35 through 40, as well as 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 11. So this is where we take our Brit Chadasha portion this week, and we see that the Shaliachim, the apostles, do not give us much detail, so we can only guess why Rav Shaul, the apostle Paul, and Silas parted ways. Some say it's because that Yochanan Mark, or John Mark, some would say that, Rav Shaul thought that he was a baby or a sissy, or that he was a greenhorn, or lacked what it take to be a missionary and to live the rough missionary life on the deserts and up on the seas and all the traveling. And, because he went back home, he kind of wimped out, so to speak. And so who knows? But regardless, Rav Shaul, the Apostle Paul, and Silas split up. And Silas ended up taking Yochanan Mark, John Mark, with him. Now, Rav Shaul could have been angry and bitter about the situation and said, you didn't listen to me. This kid's green. This kid doesn't have what it takes to be a missionary. He's failed us. He went home. He left us high and dry. How can you take him as a partner? Well, Silas was his uncle after all, right? But Paul could have, or the Apostle Paul, Rav Shaul, could have been really angry and bitter about this situation and parted ways on bad terms, but he didn't. But apparently it kind of alludes in Scripture that Rav Shaul, the Apostle Paul, kept tabs on John Mark, on how he was doing, and he ended up proving himself. And Rav Shaul was like, wow, man, I was wrong about this kid. He does have what it takes. He's toughened up. He's a seasoned veteran now. He's a seasoned missionary. He's not this sissy, whiny baby, want to go home crybaby that I knew before. And so we see in Scripture that at one point, when Paul was in prison, he said, bring Yochanan Mark, bring John Mark to me, because he's profitable for me. He's good for me. He's a good guy. He's got what it takes. He's got what I need. He can give me the help and the support that I need. So we see that there wasn't any bad blood between Paul and Silas and John Mark. So we see here the Apostle Paul's display of his humble and servant-like heart, admitting that he was wrong, and kind of taking in John Mark to help him also, as well as Silas. So anyway, this is the Torah, Haftorah, and Brit Chadasha portion for this week. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks so much for watching and listening and supporting. Don't forget to click the like button. Don't forget to share it with a friend, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thanks. Shalom. Shavua Tov.